Hi everyone, Savannah here, and today we're going to be drawing this cute little fruit stall. Everything you need to follow along is linked in the description down below, so let's go ahead and jump right in. The very first thing I'm doing is changing that background, so click into layers, click background layer, and go until you find the fruit stall color palette, and we're going to use this lighter cyan color here for this background. Then go ahead and create a new layer, bring it below the outline layer, and we're going to grab this darker cyan color, the square brush, and we're going to start adding in some trees here. Now you can follow the template if you want to, or you can add trees however you want, but we're just using the square brush because it'll be easy to block in those trees, so go ahead and start placing trees in that background here. Now I'm happy with how the trees are looking, but I want to give a little bit of variation to the background here. So I'm going to go into the color palette. I'm going to grab that dark cyan, that medium dark cyan color, and I'm going to grab that square blend brush. Now you can do this on a separate layer below the tree layer if you want to. I just happen to do it all on the same layer. I was okay with it to be a little bit of a softer edge on these trees because that's not my main focal point. My focal point is going to be this stall here where we have this kind of hedgehog character, this bunny character here working the stand. So I'm focused more on those, not necessarily this background. So I'm okay with it being a little bit looser in the background. But again, if you want to do that on two separate layers, you can definitely do that. And now I am going to grab that dark cyan blue color here, and I'm going to make the whole foreground here darker as well. It was a little too light. I don't want it to be super bright. I want to actually bring the colors down a little bit. So I'm just going to darken the area here. Don't worry, it's not going to blend in all like this. We are going to add some color variation. As you can see in the bottom left image, it's not all that same color. So I'm just adding it for now as a base to develop on top of, and then we can build out more colors from that. Now I'm going to grab that square dark brush, and I'm actually going to go a little bit dark with the color here and add a little color variation to the tree. So I'm kind of going darker on the left side of the tree here, again, just to give it a little bit of dimension, but not too much because again, these trees are in the background. They're not my main focal point, so I'm not doing too much with them. I'm just adding a little bit of color variation. And then you can go ahead and grab that square blend brush to blend it out a little bit. If you want it to be more of a harsh line, you can keep it the way it was. I don't personally like that look for what I'm doing, but again, if that's the look you're going for, then you can definitely keep it harsh. So I'm going to soften these edges a little bit. Now I'm happy with how this is looking. I'm going to add the grassy area at the bottom here. So I'm going to create a new layer right above the tree layer here. And I'm going to grab one of the browns in the color palette. There's a lot of colors you can pick from. You don't have to do the exact ones I'm doing, but I am using the circle blend brush for this. I'm going to start adding in, like I mentioned, the grassy area here. So with the circle blend brush, it is pressure sensitive. So you can play around with that if you want to go brighter with the color that you have selected or go more in between. Just play around with the Apple Pencil here. The harder you press, the more the color is going to pop through. The lighter you press, the more the color on the screen already is going to be present. So just play around with the colors, but we're going to add in some of this into the area here to brighten up that grassy area. And I am going to turn the outline layer off because it is harder to see as I'm adding in these details. It makes it a little bit more muddy. So I turn it off from time to time as I'm working on these details and adding in these different colors. So I'm just going to keep building up this grassy area here with different various color browns. Again, as you can notice in the bottom left image, I do go a little bit darker towards the left side here, and especially underneath where that stall is or that stand is. But we will build these up. So grab a dark yellow orange color if you want to. There's other colors in this color palette as well if you don't want to do that color, but we're going to add that in the left side and start blending between those two colors here. And now that we have that darker color added in, you can work on blending it with the darker towards it, or you can grab this middle color in between. So I'm going to grab that yellowy orange color and just start blending it out. And then if you want to grab more of that lighter brown, you can as well. So we're just working on blending these colors together. And I'm not worried about blending it too well because I want a little bit of that grassy look. And so I'm just very lightly blending these colors in together, but still wanting to keep a little bit of sharpness there. So as you can see here, I have a little bit of those lines showing from the brush. I'm not blending it. I'm going in one direction as well as I'm adding in these different colors because I want it to look a little bit like grass. So I'm just going in more of a vertical direction here where I'm adding in these colors. I'm not going horizontal because that's not necessarily how grass looks, unless it's flattened or anything like that. But because it's grass, I want those lines to be more vertical. So that's kind of why I'm adding in these lines in that vertical way. Now with that pretty much complete, we will add a little bit more here towards the end, but I'm going to turn that grass layer off and the tree layer off because I'm going to work on adding in the fruit stall here. So I'm adding a new layer right above the grass layer we just worked on, grabbing that dark red color, the circle brush, and I'm going to trace and fill in the shape of the stall here. And once you're done with the outline, you can start filling it in. You can make the brush size a little bit bigger if you want to go faster. I also recommend turning the outline layer off because this is where you want to make sure those edges are looking how you want them to look before we add in details. So that's why I turn the outline layer off. The edges look fine for me here, but once I start filling in the color, I can start seeing maybe I need this edge to be a little bit straighter, or I need to tweak this edge. So go ahead and start filling in the color of your stall here, and then we'll work on the next bit here in a second. And one thing that I am kind of doing as I'm filling this in is following the shape of the wood on this. So I'm imagining this as a wood stall. And so I'm thinking how the wood would appear when you have a table, right? And so this long piece here, this tabletop would be more that horizontal. It doesn't look horizontal right now because I have the image twisted. But when you're looking at the image the correct way, I'm imagining those planks running horizontally here, whereas the post would be going up vertically. So you can do it that way if you want to. You don't have to. It's going to be covered with the baskets here on the table, so you won't necessarily see all of the lines here that you're adding in, but that's something that I'm kind of following. And now with that complete, I'm going to start turning on the other layers again, just so that I can visually see how this is coming together. And then we're going to work on the animals here in the image. So I'm going to work on the bunny and the hedgehog. We're going to add all the details for these two characters, and then we will add in other details here as we continue onwards. But for the bunny, I'm going to grab this orange-ish color. I'm going to trace and fill in with this color first, and then we can start adding in details. And again, make sure you're turning off the outline layer as you're building up these characters and these images, because there might be areas where you want to tweak. Now, before we start adding in more details, I'm going to use that same color and add in the shape of the hedgehog here. Now, the hedgehog has some sharper edges, right? And so I'm just kind of adding that illusion here. It's in the outline, so if you want to follow that shape, you can definitely do that. But I'm just adding in these lines here for the quills of the hedgehog. Now I'm happy with the shape of these two animals, so I'm going to set that layer to alpha lock so we can start adding details. And I did keep these on the same layer because there's no overlap between these two characters. If yours are going to overlap or you want them to overlap, I would suggest doing these on two separate layers. Right now I'm grabbing that orange color from the color palette and I'm adding in the centers of the ears here for both the hedgehog and the bunny. And I used the circle brush for the hedgehog, but I actually ended up using the circle blend for the bunny ears because I kind of wanted them to blend a little bit more into the bunny itself. And then I'm using that same color for the cheeks of the hedgehog and the nose. Now I know hedgehog noses are typically black. I just want a little bit of a different nose for the hedgehog here, just to give it a little cute, whimsical character. And I also did the cheeks of the bunny as well, all in that orange. Now I'm grabbing that dark red color and I'm going to add the quills here for the hedgehog. So the easiest way to do this, and apologies for my hand here, kind of covering this area, but I'm using that circle blend brush. I turned that size down and just adding these little brush marks here for the hedgehog. That's going to give it these kind of quill-like look here, and so I'm just gonna do that all over the body of the hedgehog where those quills would be. So not over the front of the hedgehog, but the back upper area. So again, in the outline, you see the edge of where the quills will be. Go up until that spot because they're not covered all over in these quills. So go ahead and go up into that spot, but start adding in these quills, and you can do different sizes. You can do larger size if you want to. You can do the small size like this. But again, they're just little brush strokes that are kind of going outwards from the center of the body here. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're adding them in. And I'm actually going to turn the outline layer off for this so that I can really see where I'm adding these quills, if I need to add more in certain areas or not. It just helps me visually see it better. And then once you start adding in the majority of the quills here, what I'm going to do is go back to the original color that we used for the base of this hedgehog and go over some areas on the back here because it's just going to blend it out even better, make it look a little bit more like quills and not random little brush strokes here. So I'm just going to go through same technique that I did with that darker red color. I'm just going over to blend these in a little bit better. And now I'm going to add a little bit more dimension to the actual body by grabbing that yellow orange color. And I'm going to use a circle blend brush for this, but I'm going to add in a little bit of a darker color on the lower body here, especially around where there are hands. So I'm going to give the illusion of hands without actually drawing the specific hands, but I'm just adding a little bit of color variation, a little bit of a gradient here by darkening up just a little bit on the lower half of the bunny as well as the hedgehog. And now I'm going to touch up a little bit on the orange. The edges are looking a little rough for me, so I'm just going to go touch these up real quick before we move on to the next step here. Now grab that dark red color again. We're going to use this for the eyes of the bunny and for the hedgehog. We're using the circle brush for this and then just fill it in the eyes that you want. You could do different eyes if you want to. You don't have to do these eyes. These are just really simple eyes that I wanted to do for this image. I want to keep it pretty cute and simple. So I did these dark red colored eyes, didn't give it too many variations. And then you can also do that for the mouth of the bunny as well. And also, again, the nose I did a little bit different for this hedgehog because I kind of want to make it a unique hedgehog. So I just did it on the inner part here of the nose. And I did draw a little line at the bottom just so that you know that that is a nose. So it didn't blend too much. I just wanted that to stand out a little bit more. Now let's go ahead and grab a brown color, and with the circle brush that we're using, we're just going to add in a little line around where their hands are going to be. And don't worry, we're going to blend this out so it's not such a stark line here, but I'm just adding in the area where their hands are going to be, and then we'll blend it out. So now we're just grabbing that circle blend brush and we're going to blend this out with their body. I'm adding a little bit more shadow here between where these hands are because there's going to be shadow there, but we're just going to blend this out so that you see that their hands are there, and then you can grab the color. So because we added a gradient on the body here of both of the hedgehog and the bunny, you'll want to grab the color directly from their body like I'm doing. So hold your finger down on the color you want to grab that's close to where you're adding color, and it will color pick it for you, and then you can blend that in. You can grab the color from the color palette, but that's gonna be a little bit brighter because again, we added a color variation here, so it's not exactly one color or another in that color palette. So that's why we're just grabbing colors from the actual image here. Now I am going to add a little bit of hair texture here to the front of the hedgehog, very minimal. I'm grabbing a lighter color than what we used for that base, and I'm just going to use that circle blend brush to add some hairs here. Now you can increase the size of the brush if you want to, you can decrease it. I'm just going to add a little bit of detail there. So right around here is where a portion of my video cut out. So we're missing the lights and then also the lightning of the stall here. So I'm going to add a section here showing you exactly kind of what I did for that part, and then you can apply that to your image. So feel free to, once you watch that part, pause the video, implement that into your image, and then you can come right back here and continue onwards. So to do the lights, you're going to grab a yellow color from the color palette, and you're going to use the circle blend brush for this. To start, you're going to press harder on the Apple Pencil to bring more of that yellow color in, and then you're going to very lightly spread it out because again, it's pressure sensitive. So just press very hard towards the center and then soften that touch towards the edge. That's going to give you that glow. And then you're going to grab one of the lighter, almost white colors, and just in the center, add a little bit of that white using that circle blend brush. And that's how we do the lights for the light strand. Now for the table, we have the brown, the dark brown table here. So I'll just kind of draw it out here. And then you're going to grab a lighter color here. You're using the square blend brush, and you're just going towards the edges where the light is going to be hitting. So the inner walls here of the post, and then the top of the table here, you're just going to add in some lighter colors here and blend it out. Now you can alternate between the two colors here to blend it out even further, but that's essentially what you're going to do, is use that square blend brush to blend those colors in. Now that you are back, let's go ahead and keep continuing on with this. So I'm adding in the string for the lights that we just worked through, and I'm doing a grayish color for this, and I'm just following the outline here for the light strand. And I did use a circle blend brush for this, but you could also use a circle brush. So I'm just going to go over those lines one more time because I did use that circle blend brush. I just really want that line to pop and not just kind of blend in. And now with the dark red orange color on that same strand that we just did, I'm going to just add a little connector piece for these lights to that strand. So I'm just doing it at the top of the lights, connecting them to the light strand here. Now go ahead and set that layer to alpha lock. Grab one of the yellow colors here, the circle blend brush, and we're just going to add a little bit of a light glow to the areas where the lights are hanging, and also you can do a little bit on the actual strand itself. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to add the leaves that are kind of crawling up on the stall here. I'm using the yellow orange color for this, and I'm doing that layer right above the layer that we just created. And you can use a circle blend brush for this. That's what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to start adding in shapes of the leaves here and filling them in. We'll add details here in a little bit, but for now, just go ahead and start filling in that color. And I did do all of this on the same layer. You can separate these out if you want to. I just did them on one layer because it was simpler for me and I didn't do too many details on the leaves. I kept them all pretty similar, but if you want to give it a little bit more dimension, do them on a couple different layers and do different colors from the color palette. And then that way it gives a lot more dimension. But again, I just kind of kept this pretty simple. I didn't want to do too many colors for these leaves. And now that we have all of those added in, let's go ahead and set that layer to alpha lock and we can start adding in some details. So I'm pulling in just other colors from the color palette. You can pull in some of the more bluish toned color. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm grabbing that medium cyan color and adding a little bit of interest to the center of these leaves here, so giving that little bit of leaf detail with this color. And then I'm going to add in some shadows and gradients here because there are lights that are kind of lighting up parts of it where other areas would be in the shadow, so we will add those as well. But right now I'm just kind of going in very loosely, adding in some detail here for the leaves. And I am using that circle blend brush from the brush set. Now with that circle blend brush and that same color, I'm going to start blending very lightly, adding in darker tones to the upper areas here. So anything against the opposite side of where those lights are, I'm using this medium cyan blue color for it. And then that more greenish yellowy color I'm doing where the light source is hitting. So I'm going to add that in here, do this on all the leaves. Don't worry if you blended in a little bit of that detail work that we just added. You can add that back in, but I just want to soften up those areas first a little bit. I didn't want them to be so drastic, and so that's what I'm doing here. It's just very lightly adding in this color and softening those lines a little bit. And because we did set this to alpha lock, any detail work that you add to this layer is going to be contained in the shape of the layer. So that leafy layer that we did that with that one color, that's the shape that all these new colors that we're adding into are being confined to. So that's the beauty of doing alpha lock with the iPad with Procreate, is that you can keep those contained. Now I'm just going to touch up a little bit more of the leaf, and then I do want to add a little bit more of the detail back in. I additionally tried it with the lighter blue. I didn't like it, or that lighter cyan color. I didn't like it as much. So play around with the different colors. I'm going to start with brown just to lighten up the edge, and then I'll decide kind of what I want to do if I want to add anything. But I'm using this lighter brown to soften up and brighten up the edges where the light source is coming from. Now I'm going to try that dark cyan color here to see if I like that look. And I actually do like that look for the leaf detail here. So I'm going to use that and add in a little bit more leaf detail, because again, it kind of went away when we added in the color variation or that gradient with that color that we used for the line. So I'm just gonna add in a little bit, but I'm very loosely doing it. I have the brush set to a little bit smaller because I don't want this to be a main focal point. I just want a little bit of that detail. And then I did go back over some of those lines with that medium cyan color because I just wanted to soften it up again a little bit. I wanted that to pop, and that's why that darker color, doing that as a base, helps kind of pop. And then you go over it with this medium tone. It will tone that darker color down, but still give that medium tone more of a presence because it's kind of blending between those two tones. And now let's go ahead and add the fruit to the table. So you can use any colors that you want from the color palette for the baskets. As you can see in the bottom left, I used more yellows, reds, and blues for these colors. But I'm going to start with red. I'm going to use the circle brush. I'm going to trace and fill in the shape of the bins here, and then we will build up this area, add in the fruit and some color variation, some gradients, some highlights and shadows, and then we will be close to being done. And I am going to put some of these on the same layer and separate some of the other boxes here. So I'm doing the red on the same layer. There's no overlap between those two, so it's fine to keep those on the same layer. And then I'll create different layers for the other bins here that we're doing. But I'm going to fill in the shape of this red one here on the left. And then I'm going to touch up the edges, set this out to alpha lock, and add a little bit of details to these boxes before we move on to the other ones. Now with this layer set to alpha lock, I grabbed one of the orange colors here, and instead of using the circle brush that I have selected right now, go ahead and switch over to the circle blend brush and start adding in some lighter color to the face of the box here. And then again, turn that outline layer off so you can touch up the edges of the face of the boxes here. Then I grabbed an even lighter orange, and I'm going to do the edge on the top of the boxes here. I made them lighter because you have that light coming down from the top, and so those edges will be brighter than the side and the front of the box here. And then again, turn that outline layer off and just touch up the edges here. And now we're going to add the other boxes and we're going to do the same techniques, but again, like I mentioned, we're doing these on separate layers. So we're going to create a box to the right of this bright red box, and I'm going to make it more of this bluish gray color. So I'm going to start with the darker grayish blue color. I'm going to trace and fill in the shape of the box, and then I will add in lighter tones to the face and the top, similar to how we did the other boxes here, the other red boxes, but this layer will be below that red box layer because it's to the right of those boxes. So the red boxes should be in front of or above this layer here. And then same technique that we used on the red box, grab that circle blend brush, that lighter gray color, and we're going to do the face of the box here. Now that gray color that I selected was not light enough for my liking, so if you want to make it a little bit lighter, go ahead and grab a lighter color from the color wheel. But the lightest color in this area was light enough for me, so I just used that one from the color palette. And then again, just go through and touch up the edges of each of the sections that you just added. Now, one thing before we add in another box is separate out those red boxes that we already created. So go to the red box layer, click the S or selection tool up there, and on freehand, just circle around the box to the right, copy it to a new layer, and then erase on the original layer that box that we had created. Now, the reason I separated those two boxes out is because the layers, when we start adding in boxes, we want a box to be behind the box to the left here, the red box to the left, but also in front of the box to the right. And with those two boxes on the same layer, we weren't going to be able to do that. So unless you wanted to erase edges, which I didn't want to do that. I want to keep this pretty simple. So that's why I separated those out. So when you're doing this, just do these all on separate layers, which you probably, if you're following along, didn't do that. So hopefully you can follow along with this section here, but we're just going to separate out those layers so that we can add them in the correct order here. And now we just have these last two boxes. I made them both yellow, so I'm going to add in just the plain yellow color first, and then we'll go in and add the details here in a second. But I did both of these yellow because we have two red already, and I didn't want two colors right next to each other, so I didn't want to do another blue right next to the blue box there on the right. So I did both of those as yellow. So I'm just going to add in both of the basic shapes of the boxes here. The box to the furthest right will be underneath of all the other box layers. So just keep that in mind as you're adding that in, but I'm just going to add in the base color here first. Now, I actually ended up using that color that we used for the base of the boxes as the lightest color. So now I need to darken the face and the left side of the box on the left. So I'm going to grab a brown color for that, and I'm using the circle blend brush. I'm just going to darken the face of both of these. And because the box on the right doesn't have a left edge, we don't have to worry about that. So I'm only going to add in a darker color on the left side for this box on the left. And I'm going to do one of those dark reddish colors here, that dark red orange color for that left side. And I ended up not liking leaving that yellow rim at the top. I still needed another color, so I'm just grabbing a lighter yellow color, that circle blend brush, and I'm going to just add in the rim here, similar to what we did with those other boxes. And now we can't have a stall without fruit in these baskets, so let's go ahead and add them. I kind of tried to add maybe oranges, some lemons, some blueberries. You can add anything that you want to these baskets, but I started with this kind of orangey brown color, and I'm adding this color to the box to the left and to the right, and so I'm just tracing and filling in the shape of these fruit here. And now you can kind of touch up the edges of the fruit here. Again, we will add in more detail, more highlights and shadows, but I'm just kind of touching up the edges before we do that. And I'm going to use the same color and add it to the yellow box to the right. You can do these on the same layer if you want to, but I'm going to just trace the edge, and then I actually end up just tracing around the inner part of the box here because I want those fruit to be kind of tucked into the box. So I just kind of went around the edge there and filled in the shape here. And because those are the same colors that we used for the box, I just turned that layer off so I can make sure the edge looks good before I moved on to adding in details. And now let's go ahead and continue this. We're going to add other fruits. So I'm going to grab this reddish orange color and add the fruit here to this yellow box on the left and continue doing this to fill in the rest of the fruit. Again, using any colors that you want to use. I did kind of more like oranges and blueberries and lemons, but feel free to add any colors that you want. And the reason I kept all the fruit on the same layer as opposed to the bins, we kept them on separate layers, is because there's not really any overlap between the fruit here once they're in those baskets. And so I kept it on the same layer. If you want to separate them out, you definitely can do that, but it was just easier for me to keep them all on the same layer. Now, before we add in details to the fruit, I'm actually going to add a little bit of shadow on the table underneath where these baskets are. So grab that dark reddish color, the circle blend brush, and just underneath the baskets, we're going to add that shadow in. So you can do it very lightly pressing if you want a little bit of a softer shadow, or you can press a little bit harder, especially as you go up underneath the basket there. You can press a little bit harder, but we're just going to add in shadow here. And one thing I did before we add the fruit color variations there, the highlights and shadows, is I'm going to add some grass variation here. So you'll notice in the outline I have some grass kind of sprigs coming out of the ground. I did this on a new layer above all the other layers here, and I'm just using the dark cyan color for now, but we will set this layer to alpha log, add a little bit of color variation, and then we will jump to the fruit, finish those out, and then if there's anything else we need to touch up, we'll do that at the end. Now let's go ahead and grab a different color for this. After setting that layer to alpha lock, I'm going to grab that yellow orange color, that circle blend brush, and just add in a little bit of color variation. Now I did increase the brush size for this, and I'm just doing a light touch going over some of the areas to blend them out a little bit more. I'm keeping the ones on the left a little bit darker, but I did want to soften up the ones especially on the right because it's a little bit brighter from the lights hanging down. So I'm softening those up a little bit. You can add multiple different colors. So I'm grabbing the dark yellow, orange color as well, but just add in a little bit of color variation. So it's not just looking like one tone. We have multiple different tones. It gives a little bit more of a unique characteristic to it. Now, one last little thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more grass, especially in front of the legs on the left side here of the stall. So I'm turning that layer that we just created, I'm turning that layer off, the alpha lock off so that I can add this detail in. I'm just going to grab that yellow orange color and just add a little bit of grassy bits here and there, freehanding it. But again, I'm doing it mainly over the left legs to blend them in because this is tall grass, and so it's not looking like it's tall grass when those legs are such a stark edge to them. So I'm just adding in a little bit of that darker, I did that darker yellow orange and a little bit lighter just to blend it in a little bit more. And now let's go ahead and alpha lock the fruit layer so we can start adding in the highlights and any shadows we want to add. And now the way that I'm handling these fruit, I'm not adding too many details, but what I am doing is going in with a lighter color. So for this one, I went in with this lighter grayish, bluish green color, and I'm adding it to the areas where that light would be hitting. So the top of the fruit here, for this instance, I'm adding it in, and then I'm grabbing that original color we used for the fruit to blend it out to give that definition that there are multiple different fruits within this basket. And so that's the technique that I'm kind of doing. You can go darker too on the bottom here. So on the bottom edge of the fruit, you can grab a darker color and darken it up even more. But I'm just kind of giving the illusion here that there's more fruit just by using this lighter color. So you're just doing that circle blend brush very lightly, blending that color in with the base color that we have. And then if you went too light like I did there, you can bring more of that base color in. So that's what I'm just doing, is playing with the shading here between those two colors. You can even go darker if you want to as well. And you can have fun with this. You don't have to do the same fruit I did, or even the same fruit in all the different baskets here. I just happened to, because I wanted to keep it somewhat simplistic for this video. But have fun, make this an extra challenge for yourself to add different fruit. Maybe one of the baskets has bananas, maybe another basket has cherries. Whatever fruit is your favorite, have fun, play it up, do the different fruit, try the different techniques. Especially, with the brushes here, you can try different techniques to see if it's looking how you want it to look with those. But drop in the comments below what fruit you added to your fruit stall. I'd love to see. So make sure you also tag me on socials so I can take a look. And now we just need to add in the lemon. So I'm going to add in the lighter yellow color here. Same thing I'm doing on the right side as well. So I'm just adding in the color. And then once we're done with the lemons, we will be done with our image. And I did have the lemons have opposite areas where that light source is coming in. So the lemons on the left, the light source is more coming from the right. And so that's why I have that lighter color on the right. Whereas the lemons on the right side, the light source coming more from the left. So play around with the light source again with that hanging light. You could also do it from the top, because technically the lights are kind of hanging from the top. But I just want to play around, give it a little bit of your eyes kind of drawn towards the center where the bunny and hedgehog are. So that's what I wanted to do with the light on the fruit, is kind of guide your eye to the center here, but you can play around with that in your image. And there we have our final image. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and also let me know again in the comments what fruit you end up using in your stall. I'll see everyone in the next video.